Hey everyone, I'm Traversian and this is why you should play Shadow of the Colossus. If you haven't played this game yourself, you've almost definitely at least heard of it. It's on a lot of gamers' top 10 lists for very good reason. Shadow of the Colossus is a unique game in a lot of ways. First of all, it's a game comprised entirely of boss fights. Yeah, there's no normal enemies, just 16 massive colossi that want you dead. But let's back up. You play a character called Wander, yes really, who travels to a forbidden land on probably the bravest horse in existence. Once there, he approaches a forbidden temple on what I assume is a forbidden bridge and puts the huge thing he's been carrying all this way on a forbidden altar, and oh hey, it's a body. Which brings us to the plot. Wander has brought the body of his sister, bestie, girlfriend. It's never made explicitly clear in-game just who this girl is, just that she's cute and also dead. According to the credits though, her name is Mono, so let's just go with that. Wander brought Mono to the super ultra forbidden land because she got sacrificed for having a cursed fate and he's pissed about it, so he wants the talking ceiling entity in the temple to bring her back to life. Yeah, that's legit. For their part, the probably evil ceiling entity is totally down with this, but because they are definitely not altruistic, they want something in return. You have to destroy all the idols standing along the sides of the temple. Unfortunately, you can't just throw some gunpowder around and call it a day. In order to break the idols, you have to defeat the physical manifestations of the idols scattered around the forbidden land, and they just so happen to be giant monsters. That's not even the only thing you have to do, but the ceiling entity is vague about the rest, so it's probably fine. In order to find the colossi out in the world, you have to hold your magic sword up to the light and turn it until the reflection forms into a beam and your controller vibrates, then head that direction. The world of Shadow of the Colossus is big, and you might have a direction, but that direction tends to be as the crow flies, so one of the game's challenges can sometimes just be figuring out how the hell you're supposed to get around a mountain or down a cliff. Really pretty though, and it's fun to discover each new area you come across and wonder just what kind of colossus you're going to be fighting that lives there. And speaking of the colossi, they are the main attraction of this game for a reason. The colossi are massive, and you'd think that'd be an obvious observation, but the point isn't that it's literal, it's that these monsters actually feel big, and you, by contrast, feel incredibly small. Seriously, you're a tiny, insignificant human that's smaller than most of their fingers. You've got a sword that's their equivalent of a toothpick and a bow that fires arrows that might as well be splinters. These things seem insurmountable every time you reach a new one, and the fact that the game manages to trigger that feeling even though you know there has to be a way to beat them is impressive. So if you can't outfight it, outsmart it. Each colossus has a small number of weak spots located on its body, which can be found by, again, using your sword to point them out. The hardest part of the fight is going to be getting to those weak spots, considering they're usually dozens if not hundreds of feet in the air, with some incredibly frustrating exceptions. Most of the colossi have fur you can grab onto to climb them once you either bring them down to your level or get up to theirs, but you can only hold on for so long. Your grip gauge measures how long you can hold on before you get tired, which adds a ticking clock mechanic to an already tricky fight. Assuming you manage to get to a weak spot, stab it with your magic sword and watch with satisfaction as the colossus's health drains, then realize the spot you stabbed is one of 3 and repeat the process. That may sound frustrating for the sake of it, but it really isn't. The amazing thing about this game is that all 16 colossi are unique. You have to come up with a new strategy and plan of attack for each one. So the colossi may be boss fights, but at their core, they're also puzzles. Gigantic, angry puzzles that want to smoosh you, but still puzzles. And they manage to walk that fine line between being difficult enough to challenge you and simple enough that when you figure out the answer, you're deeply disappointed in yourself for not recognizing it sooner. Since most of the game is strategy-oriented, you can't really affect Wander's capabilities. Your grip gauge in the health bar will expand a little every time you defeat a colossus, but that's about it. Sure, you can go the route of hunting down teeny lizards in the Forbidden Lands and eating their tails, but that'll only help you out by a nearly invisible amount. On the upside, Shadow of the Colossus has New Game Plus, so when you start a new game after completing it, you open with the same grip gauge and health bar you ended with. So the game actually gets easier the more you replay it, unless you want to replay it on hard mode because you're a masochist. There are a couple of very small annoyances with the game, and they are almost all the controls. Wander's controls are not what you think they're gonna be, and he flings himself around like a ragdoll, so sometimes he feels difficult to control. Aggro, your loyal steed, suffers from a bad case of tank controls, which can also be difficult to get the hang of. But to be fair, Wander's controls actually become pretty immersive as the game goes on once you get used to them. Also, when Wander gets knocked down or falls, he has to lie there and go through an entire existential crisis before he'll finally get back up, which is really annoying when the Colossus is winding up for another hit and just keeps knocking you down the second you're on your feet. That's not actually a deal breaker either. A well-timed dodge roll will get you out of the way with only slightly higher blood pressure. Shadow of the Colossus is another good old PS2 classic that found a home as a digital download for the PS3 and the PlayStation Store, though you can also find it in hard copy bundled with the developer's previous game. Charms of Shadow of the Colossus far outweigh any tiny gripes that could be mentioned about it. You want to keep playing just to see what they could possibly throw at you next, and the fact that the game manages to nail the feeling of being small, weak, helpless, and isolated, and still manages to make you feel like a badass is proof enough of how effective it is. If you've got a craving for an immersive world and strategic gameplay, Shadow of the Colossus will give you what you're looking for.